Hello everyone, welcome to this module on writing essentials. In this series on sentences, this is lecture number 6, and in this we are going to deal with the subject of regular verbs and irregular verbs, verbs that agree and verbs that do not agree in the past and past participle forms. Now let's get a quick look at what do regular verbs and irregular verbs mean. Now, regular verbs are the verbs that follow a standard set of rules for forming their past forms and their past participle forms. For example, the verb walk, its present form is walk, and its past form is formed by using or adding ed walked. Its past participle form is again formed by adding ed to the present form, so it's again walked. And then the present participle form is formed by adding ing to the present form, so it's walking. Whereas irregular verbs are those verbs that form their past and past participle forms in a unique way. For example, let's take the verb fall. Now the present tense of the verb fall is fall. Its present participle is similar to that of a regular verb, falling. But then its past form is not falled, but it's fell. Even its past participle form again is not formed by adding ed, but it's fallen. So irregular verbs do not follow the pattern of forming their past form and its past participle forms. Now let's look at this passage and identify the wrongly written verb forms. Ben had an accident today. He and I were haul a load of furniture from the warehouse. As we drove, the end gate snapped open and a box was fall out. Ben yelled and I stopped. He put it back in and slammed the end gate shut. He snagged his thumb in the latch. I looked at it and rubbed it. I asked if he was hurt and would have taken him to the clinic. He seemed okay, but later we learned his thumb was broken. Now there are many verbs in this passage which are not written in the form they should have been. And even there are some verbs which are written unnecessarily. Okay, now let's look at how this should have been written in the right way. Yes, so Ben had an accident today. That sentence has no mistake. But the second one, he and I were hauling a load of furniture from the warehouse. It's something like a past continuous form. And as we drove, the end gate snapped. And though in the previous word we had snapped, but then it was no double P but only single P. But when we form the past form of snap, it snapped. Okay, two P's. And a box fell out. Not fall out, but it's fell out. Ben yelled and I stopped. Again, the past form of stopped here is formed by using a double P. He put it back. It's not putted it back, but put it back. And slammed. Again, there is a doubling of consonant M in the past form. He snagged his thumb. Again, a doubling of consonant G in the past form. I looked at it and rubbed it. Again, a doubling of the consonant B in the past form. I asked if he was hurt and would have taken. We found that in the previous paragraph it was would off, whereas it should have been would have taken him to the clinic. He seemed okay, but later we learned his thumb was broken. Right, so what we find here is there are a number of verbs which are changing their past forms. Now all of them are in there are regular verbs. We don't find that the past form of some verb here was changed, but every past form has a ed attached to it. apart from the verb fall, which is fell. Right. So now let's look at um, the regular verbs and how their past forms are formed. Generally, the principal parts of verbs are four, and these are the fundamental forms that are used to create like tense. They are present form of the verb, the past form of the verb, and the two participle forms, present participle form and the past participle form. Let's take a quick look at each of the forms and how they do appear in the cases of verbs. Now the present form refers to something that is existing or happening now, or to an action that happens routinely. So it's something like which is happening now or which happened yesterday, which always happens. In a sense, we talk about the actions or which are routines or habits. I walk my dog every day. Thomas is here already. As soon as my mom wakes up, she goes straight into the kitchen to make a cup of coffee. Now, in these three examples, what we find is in the first sentence, I walk my dog every day, and all of the in all of these sentences, we find there are verbs in the present form: walk, is, wakes, and goes. And in the first case, in the first sentence, it talks about a routine. It talks about something that happens every day. The second sentence refers to something that is existing. Thomas is here already. And the third one again is something that talks about an action that happens every day, or which is a habit. As soon as my mom wakes up, she goes straight into the kitchen to make a cup of coffee. So what we find is in the present form, we either have the verb like walk, or we have the verb with an s attached to it like wakes. So if it's a third person, we generally use goes or wakes, like the present form is added with the letter s. And if it's in like the first or the second person, we only use the verb in its base form. Now present participle is another fundamental form of a verb, and this is formed by adding ing to the end of the regular verbs. Now it is used with or to be, forms of the verb to be, such as am, is, are, was, or were. So if it's a present, a present tenses, then we use am, is, and are. And if it's a past tense, we use was and were. Now the present participle form of a verb expresses an ongoing action. This doesn't refer to any action that happens every day or which is an habit or a routine or a fact. It only talks about those actions which are ongoing. The helping verbs are used with the present participle. They determine the tense, the time. If it's am, is, and are, it's present time. If it's was and were, it's past time. Let's look at some examples. Now I'm looking for the notebook I lost in yesterday's class. I was eating dinner when she called. They were trying to decide where to go on vacation when I arrived. Now here we find three verb forms with present participle: am looking, was eating, and were trying. Now am looking, am is used with I, and similarly was is used with I. Now in the first case, am looking talks about the present time. That's why we have used the helping verb am. But in the two other cases, was eating and were eating, they refer to time which is in the past. So that's why we use was and were as helping verbs. So present participle forms, that is the ing forms, always talk about an ongoing action. So in the first case, it's present continuous tense, whereas in the second and third case, it's past continuous tense. So either present or past, but they always talk about some progressive action or some continuous tense, continuous form of the verb. Now past form. Now past form of a verb is used to indicate that something has already been completed. I hired my assistant because his resume was impeccable. He learned Japanese during his semester abroad in Tokyo. They placed their trust in the new counselor. In all of these three sentences, we have used the past form of verbs hire, learn, and place, and they are formed by the addition of ed or d to the main verb: hired, learned, and placed. They all talk about an action which has already been completed and which is not going on right now. The past participle is another fundamental form of the verbs, and this is formed by adding d or ed to the end of the regular verbs. Now it is used with the helping verb have, has, have, or had. I have learned a thing or two in my life. She has noticed his weight gain. They already had elected a new chairwoman when she arrived. Now in these three cases we have the have forms of the verb attached to the past participle: have learned, has noticed, and had elected. Now has and have, helping verbs, they indicate the tense, that is, it's present, whereas had tells us that the time is in past. So have learned and has noticed talk about present perfect tenses, whereas had elected talks about past perfect tenses. So we need to understand that the past participle can't be used alone, just like the present participle form. They always have to be used along with the helping verbs. The present participle is always used along with the helping verb be, that is, am, are, was, and were, whereas the past participle form is always used with the helping verb have, that is, has, have, or had. Now, regular verbs follow a standard set of rules for forming their present participle and past forms. Now, the present participle is formed by adding ing. But if a verb ends with the letter E, then we drop the E before adding ing. The past is formed by adding ed. If the verb ends with the letter E, again we drop the letter E and just add D. Let's look at an example. Link. Now link is a verb, it's in its present form. When we look at its present participle, it's linking. So the present participle is formed by adding ing, and the past participle is formed by adding ed, linked. But then there is a verb like prepare which ends with the verb letter E. The present form is prepare, P-R-E-P-A-R-E, whereas while forming the present participle we add ing, but because it ends with the letter E, we drop the letter E and then add ing. So preparing becomes P-R-E-P-A-R-I-N-G and not P-R-E-P-A-R-E-I-N-G. So similarly, the past participle is again formed by just adding D and not ed. Sometimes when a verb ends with a vowel followed by a consonant, the last consonant is doubled before adding ing or ed. So the last three letters of some verbs might be in the pattern of consonant, vowel, and consonant. In such a case, we generally double the last consonant while forming the present participle and the past forms. Let's look at some examples. Net. Now here the verb net is in the form of CVC, consonant N, then vowel letter E, then again a consonant T. Now that's its present form. While forming its present participle, we double the letter T, and netting is not N-E-T-I-N-G, but it is N-E-T-T-I-N-G. Similarly, the past participle form netted is made by doubling the last letter T. So it's netted, N-E-T-T-E-D. Again, trip. Now here, the last three letters of the verb trip are in the form of consonant, vowel and consonant. Again, the present participle is formed by doubling the last consonant P before adding ing, tripping. And again, the past participle is formed by doubling P and then adding ed, tripped. So let's look at some more examples to understand it better. So these are some verbs which end with the CVC pattern. So like emit, grab, occur, ship, step, cap. And in each of these cases, the present participle and the past forms are formed by doubling the last consonant, that is emitting, grabbing, occurring, shipping, stepping, or capping. Sometimes this is overruled, and this has only one exception, and that exception is if the final consonant is a W, it is not doubled before adding ing or ed. For example, let's look at the verb show. Now, show is in the CVC pattern, that is the last three letters are consonant, vowel and consonant, but the verb ends with a consonant W, and so we do not double the consonant W, but just and it's just showing is showing and not showing. And similarly, showed is showed. So only in the case where the final consonant is a W, we do not double uh, the letters. Sometimes regular verbs might end with a consonant and followed by Y. So when a verb ends with a consonant followed by Y, like cry, empty, hurry, the present participle is formed by adding ing. To create the past form, we drop the Y and replace it with I and then add ed. So for example, frying becomes F-R-Y-I-N-G. And fried becomes where the Y is removed and we use I and then add ed, fried. So this only happens when the verb ends with a consonant followed by Y. Similarly, study is studying and then studied. We remove the Y and add I and then ed. And now let's look at some more examples which are done in this fashion. Falsify is falsifying and then falsified. Magnify, magnifying and magnified. Marry, marrying and married. Multiply, multiplying and multiplied. Occupy, occupying and occupied. Again, in all of these cases, the last two letters are a consonant followed by Y, a consonant followed by Y. And this is how we make their present participles and past participle forms. Some regular verbs have the same present, past and past participle forms. That means the only time they change their form is in the present participle while using ing. Otherwise, every other form is same. So for example, if you look at the verb bet, it's bet in the present, bet again in the past, and bet again in the past participle, and the only form that changes is betting, which is in the present participle. So these are some verbs which have only one part uh, in their present, past and participle form. Hit, set, bid, hurt, shut, burst, put, spread, cost, quit, upset, cut and read. Let's look at an example. The first baseman hit a home run. Now here hit is in the present form. In yesterday's game, the first baseman hit a home run. Again, here the hit is in its past form because the time is past. The first baseman has hit 20 home runs so far in this year, and here hit is preceded by have form, so it's past participle. And the only case where hit is changing is in the present participle, where it becomes the first baseman is hitting yet another home run. Sometimes words are incorrectly written because we don't always use or hear the ed in spoken English. But then we never should forget to add ed to the past and past participle forms of these words. For example, ask. When we say ask in its past form, we say asked. So we don't actually hear the ed in the spoken form. That does not mean that we should not write ed in the written form. So we ask to see the recall book. It's not ask, but it's asked. The rescuers risked their lives to save the stranded mountain climbers. We are supposed to finish this for tomorrow. This group is used to working together, and in all of these cases the pronunciation of these past forms do not actually resemble the ed, but it's it. So that's why though it's not heard in the spoken form, we should always remember to write ed in its written form. So now let's do some exercises to what we have learned up to now. Now let's complete each of these sentences with the correct past tense form of the verb given. Cook. When we arrived, he was dash dinner for us. Cook. Okay. I dashed my niece while my sister went shopping, using the verb watch. Now we have to write the past tense form. She dashed her own business in 2004 and it is thriving. My mother dashed my favorite dish for my birthday last year. She dashed a different side to her personality during the meeting. My parents dashed to drink a lot of coffee. And yes, now these are the correct verb forms. When we arrived, he was. Now here it's like, because the verb is preceded by the helping verb of be, that is was, it should not be the past form but rather the present participle. So he was cooking dinner for us. But all of the other forms are like I watched, she opened, my mother baked, she showed, my parents used to. Right. Now let's do another short little quiz where um, let's try to fill up the correct form of the verb which is given at the beginning of each sentence. Yes. In the first case, it's defined. Paul defined the word impetus for us. So we have to identify if it's the present, the past, or the past participle, or the present participle form which is suitable there. Water is, because the helping verb is written, we have to go with the present participle, that is, water is leaking through the roof. The snow melted early this year. Kay and Sandy are organizing the retirement dinner this year. Again, the helping verb are determines that this is present participle. The custodian placed an air freshener in the lounge. Now again, let's try to do these exercise where we need to identify the correct form of the verb in the sentences. The wolf tried desperately to escape from the trap. The new contract nullified the old one. The election committee is tallying the votes right now. The children pitied the caged puppy. Marge's time in the race qualified her for the national meet. That's right. But then each of these has a different form to their ed or forms. So when we write tried, it's like tried because it's ends with y. Similarly, nullified is we remove y and then we add I and ed. And pt, again we remove the y and then use ied. Similarly, qualified is like we remove y and used ied. Right, so up to now we have looked at the different types of regular verbs and their formations of present participle, past participle and the past forms. Now let's look at some irregular verbs. Now look at these instance of a small paragraph and try to identify the mistakes in the verb forms. I don't know what you asked this morning. I dig through the recycling bin to look for your records. I seen a few things that seem like what we was looking for, but I think last night's trash must have went to the dumpster and I'm not digging in there. Now you might have easily observed that there are some verbs which are wrongly written in their formation. Yeah, now these are the mistakes here. I did what you asked this morning, not done. And then it's not digged, but it's dug. I dug through the recycling bin to look for your records. I saw a few things that seemed like what we were looking for, but I think last night's trash must have gone to the dumpster and I'm not digging in there. Yes. Now let's look at these irregulars a little more closely. Now irregular verbs can have similar past and past participle forms. Though they change their past forms and they don't follow the pattern of adding ed, but sometimes their past and past participles can be same. Like in the case of these words, like bite, it's bit and bit. Hold, held, and then held. Hear, heard, and heard. Bleed, it's bled and bled. Dig, dug, dug. Shine, shone, shone. Shoot, shot, shot. Tear, tore, torn. Wear, wore, worn. Sleep, slept, slept. Bring, brought, brought. Find, found, found. In all of these cases, we find that the past and past participles forms are similar. Only in the case of tear and wear, we find that they are different, like tore and torn, wore and worn. Otherwise, all the other forms have similar past and past participle forms. But then there could be some irregular verbs with three distinct forms. That means we'll have a different present form, we will have a different past form, and also a different past participle form, like this case. Begin, began, begun. Do, did, and done. Go, went, gone. Drink, drank, drunk. Blow, blew, blown. Ring, rang, rung. Stink, stank, stunk. Know, knew, known. Fly, flew, and flown. We observe that in each of the case, the present, past, and past participle forms are very distinct from each other. Let's look at some more examples and understand how they are formed. Choose, chose, and chosen. Rise, rose, and risen. Forget, forgot, forgotten. Take, took, and taken. Fall, fell, and flown. Run, ran, and run. Write, wrote, and written. Steal, stole, and stolen. Freeze, froze, and frozen. So now let's try to do an exercise where we have to choose the correct form of the verb given in the following sentences. So the teacher asked the student a question. Life dealt me a good hand. The plumbers did a good job of stopping the leak. The lake will freeze over by morning. My new diet has not yet begun to work. Now If you have written asked, dealt, did, freeze and begun, you have done well. Now let's do another exercise to identify the correct form of the verb. Look at these sentences and try to find the correct form of the verb. Right. In the first case, it's not here, it's heard, because it's the past time, yesterday. In the second case, it's again in the past form, paid. It's cold enough to lit the furnace. Brianna never told us what you meant. Do you meant that we will be without electricity all evening? The twins spent last evening with their grandparents. We always brought deviled eggs to every family picnic. The center fielder caught the ball and threw it to the home plate. Hall thought the fruit would have been delivered by now. We found water in our basement every spring. Let's do one final exercise to see if we have understood it all properly. Yes. So the answers are: it has begun to rain. The congregation sang the first two verses of the hymn. The builder did all the planning for us. The neighbors have gone on vacation. Jack has been putting in overtime for the last 3 weeks. The sweatshirt shrank when I washed it. The ship must have sunk about 125 years ago. All of the children have grown up and moved away. So, in this video, we've been learning about the different types of regular and irregular verbs and their different forms. We have understood that any verb will have four fundamental forms, that is the present form, the past form, the present participle form, and the past participle form. Of course, in the regular verbs case, the present and the past and the past participle forms are formed by adding ed to the verb. If the verb ends with letter E, then the letter E is dropped and then we add ed to form the past and past participle forms. Whereas irregular verbs do not follow a particular pattern. Whatever the case may be, the present participle forms are always preceded by the helping verb from the verb be, that is, am, are, to show the present time, and was and were to show past time. Similarly, the past participle forms are always preceded by the verb form of have, has and have to denote present time, and had to denote past time. We never use the present participle and the past participle form without these helping verbs. So thank you for listening to this video, and if you have any queries, please approach us on the details given. Have a good day.